Alex co-founded Partisans, an award-winning interdisciplinary architecture studio with a focus on design and technology and a commitment to inventive and creative design solutions. Previous to the firm's founding, Alex studied sculpture and architecture at the University of Waterloo School of Architecture and the University of Rome, where he graduated as a President's Scholar. He has been the recipient of numerous awards and exhibitions, including a New York Prize Fellowship awarded by the Van Alen Institute for Architecture. In 2010, he was admitted to postgraduate studies at the Architectural Association School in London, but left to found Partisans in Toronto. Partisans' work is inspiring, it's innovative, and it's wildly ambitious. They approach architecture as a collective political act for social and cultural good. Their work transcends many scales, from interiors all the way to city planning, effortlessly moving between surfaces and orientations, reinterpreting and rethinking all forms, materials, and assemblies in fascinating, groundbreaking ways. The firm is not afraid to take chances, and to quote Alex directly, declares that beauty emerges when design misbehaves. Their playfulness attracts clients that seek to challenge conventions and reimagine what architecture can become. Winner of the Emerging Architectural Practice Award by the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada in 2020, the jury declares Partisans embodies a bold and expansive vision of architecture as an art form and a profession engaged with the biggest cultural questions. Let's please welcome Alex Josephson from Partisans Art.
Thanks a lot, Em. Hi, can you hear me? Great audio. It's super amazing to be in Austin. It's my first time in Texas, but I've had an amazing time. We drove to Marfa Saturday morning. Incredible. Highly recommended if you haven't been. So huge fans of Texas, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. There you go. More intimacy, better. I don't mind the light, actually. So I entitled this talk Post-Physical Architecture. I'm going to get there, but I'm going to start in the decidedly physical because we're still there. Like Biden said the other week, we still need gas for a bit. So in 2012, we started Partisans. And the idea was we didn't call ourselves PB&J, Puya Backdash Alex Josephson. We called it Partisans because we truly believe that architecture is a vessel for not just formal experimentation on an urban or city building scale or even a planetary scale, but it's really a vessel for our values and who we are as people and cultures. So it takes a village. And in my experience, building architecture does take a group of people who believe in that vision, not just a sort of monastic, one heroic person's idea of a building, for example. So this is us. We're about 20 people in Toronto. We've grown over the years and growing more. Commissions growing as well. But I love teaching at schools because I get to tell you about how school factored into it. And it really mattered to me and our studio. It all started with a temporary mosque, actually, in Toronto. This project developed out of a personal desire to understand how after graduating from architecture school in 2007 from my undergraduate degree, how I could learn about the Abrahamic religions, get back in touch with that. We'd started architecture school in 2001 in the fall, and September 11th was my first day of studio. And it really just changed the way I saw the world, and I wanted to understand everybody. I didn't want to leave anything behind, and so I built a temporary mosque. This was my thesis. And it involved building a prayer mat that was really a kind of spatial vessel for architecture to be a personalized space, but also a sculpture. And it was a dialogue between architecture, design, and the religion itself. And that really propelled us into what became a craft-centered practice in the beginning. And I'll go into these because by popular demand, these are our Irish twins, Barbaval and the Grotto. I'm going to go through this very chronologically, and I'm going gonna do a bit of a romp through our work, and then I'm gonna end in a project that I'm working on right now, which is a very post-physical concept. So by popular demand, this is the archipelago in Canada in the Georgian Bay. It is one of the most spectacular landscapes in the world. It was formed when the glaciers pulled back from North America and softened all the stone, which is now called the Canadian Shield, which is essentially just a giant thing of granite that comprises most of Ontario and sort of southwestern Canada, okay? And it made these pillow-like amazing geological formations that form these islands that are called now the 30,000 Islands, and they are spectacular. Highly recommend you visit. And we started sketching how could we build a grotto, how could we build a sauna and do justice to this landscape. And we started looking at other landscapes around the world and also sort of just as well fantastical renditions of landscape, and started to draw on that as our inspiration. And on the left is the Giant's Causeway, and on, sorry, I guess my left, your right, sorry, your left, my right, is the sort of fantastical cave-like structure that we started to be really inspired by, and some sketches. And so one of the first things we did was we actually scanned the rock. And back in 2012, this was kind of a big deal. LiDAR scanning was not commonly used. And it was really about paying an homage and respect to drawing the rock. It's almost as simple as that. We were almost praying towards this rock, this amazing formation. And in our mind, it was like, how could we build an architecture that looked like it was being born out of the rock? An architecture that could the rock. Could it draw a silhouette and a portrait of the rock? How could we experience this rock more? And we started playing with this idea of a cube coming out, as if it was a crystalline form being born out of it. And then on the inside, a sauna. And the sauna is really a hewn sculpture of wood, cedar. Most saunas are cedar. This is a practical consideration for rot and all these other kinds of vernaculars that over the millennia, cultures have discovered certain woods function better than others, cedar being the best for a sauna. There's a huge debate about this in Scandinavia and Eastern Europe. I'll just say cedar works. We didn't know how to build this when we designed this. We didn't know, we showed this rendering, and I'll talk about clients in this lecture as well. The client loved this, and obviously we said we could build it, we didn't know how to build it. And I think part of being an architect is figuring out how to build things and not letting other people necessarily tell you, because sometimes you can get outcomes that you don't want necessarily if you're not really willing to nerd it out and be in the trenches with your contractor or with fabricators to learn new and innovative ways of building things. And this happens to be true, I think, for all architects at all scales who are really blazing a new trail around the world. So we invented ways of dealing with large volumes of wood and how to orient their grains. We wrote scripts for how to actually mill them. We worked with an incredible company called MCM, which is a group of actually like an amazing Polish immigrants to Canada that built a 300 or 400 person millwork factory that do these amazing projects with us. And it's really a story about a relationship between fabricators and us and a client. It's really not about us. It wouldn't have been possible without a man named Gregory Rybeck, for example. So it essentially is a bird's nest, it's sort of like a cage. We transported it from land, from a factory to the site. The only thing done on site was the concrete foundation, which we actually did a little bit of blasting to make sure that it was stable. And then we placed with a crane this cage with the actual grotto inside of it. And none of it was built on site. We were only on site for 2 weeks. That was it. And then the dock was built. So we built about a 400-page document that essentially isolated each panel and its connection details. It was one of the most incredible achievements in our office's history, I think, because the number of pages of construction drawings for this small project per square foot would have been an interesting statistic to kind of examine. But it literally takes each piece of wood lays it up, gives dimensions, minimizes waste, and then shows how it's milled, and so on and so forth. We actually help create the files. Our team, our director of innovation, actually helped us build CNC files. We weren't letting someone else build the actual construction files. We actually did them. These are what they look like as individual panels, and then the final product. So I think we came pretty close or better to our rendering that we didn't know how to build when we started the project. And to this day, it looks and functions the way it was designed to, and in a way, it's even better because it's patinaed. Now, Bar-Oval. So Bar-Oval is this concept. It's so funny being Canadian. There's a famous Canadian chef named Grant Van Gameren. He's in New York. He's talking to a big branding company with San Pellegrino, and he's like, I want to build this tapas bar in Toronto. And they're like, well, why don't you use this guy's at Partisans? And he's like, what are you talking about, Partisans? So a Canadian is in New York talking to an international branding company and San Pellegrino, and they're telling him about us versus him knowing about us. And I think that that's a very Canadian thing. We tend to sort of ignore ourselves. And my studio is very, very adamant about fighting that. We, as Canadians, need to understand tapas. We go back to Picasso with this idea of an organic, beautiful piece of art. Bar-Oval, when you look at it, it's sort of easy to get lost in the sculptural qualities of it, but you have to go back to this sort of reality, which is that our clients were these muscle-bound base. It's 800 square feet, 20 feet by about 40 feet. What do you do with it? It has to be a bar. People have to sit there. They have to drink. They have to eat. What we learned about doing these restaurants is they're like building laboratories, and you only want to do so many. Even me said, don't do too many restaurants. Another reason why is that you can't guarantee they'll be permanent. And permanence is something I want to talk about today. So muscles. In 3D, muscles have this kind of amazing stride. Milled is very difficult, even once they're milled in a machine that has super high accuracy. So we said, well, why don't we leave the texture on it? Because we love this idea of muscles and tattoo, and this is a three-dimensional tattoo. Why don't we mill the striations of the muscles into these? And the muscles of Bar-Oval become the elements you sit in, that you eat beside, that you make a drink on. Everything is a sculpture, including the tray that you leave the oranges for the rinds. And so we started developing scripts to actually control the surface textures of the wood. We were really delving into wood. And it turned out that it was really difficult. And we actually had to rewrite the software for the CAD/CAM machine to actually achieve this feat with Master Ken years ago. About to this day is when we finished the design and went to construction. Well, I would say hurdles technically, because we couldn't control what you call the normals on the tool paths. It's very nerdy, but like in the end, when you're trying to do these things, you have to get deep. You have to go really, really down the rabbit hole. This is a simulation of the actual milling process of one of the pieces of Bar-Oval with the form, but also the order in which the mill head's actually traversing the material, and then finally the actual striations of the textures of the surface as a separate series of lines. So it's actually like lines, not a model, that we're telling the computer to actually mill the surface textures with. So you had like a volumetric approach and I guess you'd call like a linear approach. So there's like something like 40 kilometers of linear line work on it. And this is how we were able to achieve that texture. And this is the outcome. So these projects really propelled us to, I guess, a level of notoriety, notoriety is not a good word, of stature in the Toronto community to start getting projects and clients. And I want to talk about that next. We even designed the bar taps at Bar-Oval. These are the hands of the guys that own the restaurant actually squeezing and then casting these in brass. It was one of these opportunities that as a designer you relish because you designed everything down to the bar tap. So let's fast forward. Today we're working on everything from houses, like the Fold House. This is a 4,000 square foot pool, spa, and residence in the escarpment just outside of Toronto. We finished that about 2 years ago during the pandemic. Client called me from the pool after the 3-year process of building this project and was like, oh my gosh, thank you. And that is one of the most amazing feelings when a client calls you and says that, because you've actually changed their lives. You've helped them transcend and go to a new place. They're transported. And in the middle of the pandemic, I couldn't imagine any better compliment. So thank you to Alyssa and Scott. The Hang Gang Wishbone, which is a competition we were, I guess, in the top for, but I don't even know if this is actually getting built. The concept for the orbit, we first won a public competition to design a transit-oriented community outside of Toronto. And this is our approach to how a 15-minute city could be built in the lineage of Ebenezer Howard and the Garden City. This project is essentially a way to contain 150,000 people in terms of a growth plan without destroying the agricultural lands outside of Toronto, which really it's like the bread basket or the fruit basket and vegetable basket of Toronto. And this project is really about how can we build communities in suburban contexts beside a lake without building sprawl, because that's what, if you see around the edges, what the historic tendency in Canada has been. We're masters of sprawl, just like the United States, and we're trying to get away with it. We're trying to get away from this and build a very gentle density, but also intensification around the transit systems at the center. More kind of, I would say, critical projects like the WTF Tower in Toronto. What are we doing with our skylines? We're building buildings that don't have really pro formas in terms of lifespan for more than 20 years. We had a problem with that. We have a problem with the buildings being constructed like that. The WTF Shanghai. And then we're working on a series of our first towers that have been actually approved, which is extraordinary. We've gotten 4 projects right now approved from a 12-story mass timber hybrid CLT project that is in the outskirts of, it's really in Scarborough, an area in Toronto. And then other projects like 55 Yonge. But we've been working on a series of what you might call like provocations. So the WTF Tower, the Glitch Tower, and finally our first approved skyscrapers. And it's an amazing fulfillment of a dream in a way. But until it's in the ground, until it's built, it's just a dream. And if we can't get it off the paper, we're just talking. So it's been enough that the community, the planning community, and the architectural community in Toronto that allows these projects to move forward and densification to happen, to give us that nod to say, yes, this makes a difference, it's performative, it has qualities that the other architectures in the city don't, and you should have the density. So I think this idea of design for density, but also design it with performance in exchange for density is a major part of our work. A new application we have in right now is for 15 Elm Street, which is a building that's based on every unit having its own organic approach to a cloud, its own cloud balcony. A building that is inspired by this idea of rising and being in your own cloud, on Cloud 9. So then we come to 2 years ago, and everything changed. And now everything has changed. And we were all faced with different challenges. Business challenges, relationship challenges, professional challenges. Personally, and millions of others around the world, if not billions, our relationship to mortality, our mortality, the mortality of our loved ones, our friends, really came into focus. And it made me start to question the very nature of this idea of the client. We as architects should feel empowered to realize our own ideas. And this idea of a post-physical possibility where we can actually build a solution that can fulfill all sorts of change positively for people around the world without laying a brick is an extraordinary opportunity. And one that I think the entire profession needs to not only embrace, but run with right away. So for hundreds of thousands of years, if at least not 50,000 years, human beings have been really interested in their legacy. These cave markings are 40,000 years old. They're in Indonesia. There are similar markings to this in France and other places around the world. Human beings have been very concerned about our mortality and our legacy. It's something that is imbued in our subconscious. It's an instinct. We have been building, as architects, the equivalent of these markings since the dawn of the profession itself. If not this monument to love, the Taj Mahal, a legacy for a love lost, or an entire army in China. Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, extraordinary place. San Cataldo Cemetery, which I just had the incredible privilege of being able to visit recently during COVID. He was in an ICU for 10 weeks. He was intubated. We're lucky he's alive. It's a miracle, really. But my father and I had this incredible relationship where he was always interested in his mortality, and he wanted me to design a grave for him or a tomb for the family. Unfortunately, when he got COVID, we didn't get to that project. But you know, on his potential deathbed, we started discussing this. And it suddenly washed over me that I had the power to design and build this on my own. I didn't need him to have all the money to build this monument that we couldn't afford. I didn't need him to do this. We could design it, and it could be completely digital. So, like any good architect, I sat down at my drafting table, which I didn't do, obviously, but I wanted to solve the problem, and I went back to history, right? And even Ledoux had this idea of the cemetery in Chaux as this idea of like a celestial experience. Buckminster Fuller, how much does your building weigh, sir? Started to come back to me. The proverbial apple falling. The amazing thing about being able to design this project was I didn't have the constraints of the physical world except the data and the storage and my ability to control the technology and our studio's ability to control the technology. I didn't have to worry about the bricks, the labor. Well, I guess I will have to deal with the labor from a programming perspective. But it's a very different approach to how architects could be empowered to develop something that solves for a problem, which is a memorial. One of the most primal projects to the architect in any culture. So I look back and I think about how do you ascend? How do you build an ascension ground? If you look at the Sistine Chapel, or if you look at Cambodian paintings even, you see this idea of like rising. In almost every culture, not universally, but almost every culture, there's this idea that you look up, that we are going to go somewhere else or become something else. This idea of transcendence. Even Philadelphia cream cheese talks about the cloud and it's a little taste of heaven, right? That's probably like before a lot of your times here in this room. But as a kid, I remember these Philadelphia cream cheese ads on regular TV where you had an actor sitting in the cloud, and it was like a transcendent experience eating Philadelphia cream cheese. And so this idea of a memorial that's a cloud-based experience started to really emerge in my mind. Using the same kind of algorithmic technologies we use in Grasshopper to, say, control the modules of a parametrically driven facade for a skyscraper, we can control a series of surfaces and geometries, much like in the sense of a de Stijl series of aggregative surfaces and volumes, to make something new. And so the basic building blocks become these atoms of planes and planar relationships that become what I call the crypt. And you can even swarm them to become a larger entity like a cloud. Instead of a cloud being formed of vapor, they're formed of memories, they're formed of images. The basic building blocks of a memorial is the word memory. So we have multimedia files, we have video, we have audio, we have photographs, we have writing. these all can exist on a series of pre-programmed planes. I can form a cloud with them. I can build different types of clouds for different types of people. They can float in the sky. They can form an entirely new landscape, free from the constraints of, say, the two-dimensional simulation of the Earth. We can be in the sky. We can be in the stars. We don't need to have a roof. We're not keeping rain out. But inside this cloud, you can transcend. Whether on screen or using a VR headset, you can be transported. Architecture can touch everybody in the world. They don't have to have tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, nay, millions of dollars to create a transcendent memorial experience. You can design that, and you can create that, and you can give that to anybody in the world in a digital format. And in the center of the cloud, you may find me. On the edge of the cloud, I could be saved. And in a sense, we can all go to heaven. And we don't really have to die completely. There's 3 deaths. When your physical body dies, the last time someone visits your grave, and the last time someone says your name. As architects, we can solve for at least this problem, and we don't need any clients. We just need something that people want. Thank you.